Welcome, everybody, to the messianicmessage.com. This is Kimberly Rogers Brown, the author and publisher and editor, the poster, and all of that stuff, everything of the messianicmessage.com. Before we get started, let's have a word of prayer. Father, I thank you and praise you that you've brought us back to this Sabbath and that we're back here in this room. And I just pray that you will open our hearts, our minds, our eyes, and our ears to receive everything that you have for us to understand, especially about these end times. I pray in Yeshua's name. Amen. So this week's Torah portion, which we are going to read right now, is Yitro. It starts at Exodus chapter 18, verse 1, and goes to chapter 20, verse 21. Isaiah 6, 1 through 13 is the Haftarah, and Matthew 5, 17 to 20 is the Brit Hadashah. And so I will start, and then we'll just go around the room. We will start with Dawn, and then John, Dee and Roy, and then Jimmy, and Roger, and then Vicky and Debbie. All right, here we go. Exodus 18:1. Now Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel his people, how that Yahweh had brought Israel out of Egypt. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, received Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her away, and her 2 sons. The name of one son was Gershom, for Moses said, I have lived as a foreigner in a foreign land. The name of the other was Eleazar, for he said, My father's God was my help and delivered me from Pharaoh's sword. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses into the wilderness where he was encamped at the mountain of God. And he said to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, have come to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed and kissed him. They asked each other of their welfare, and they came into the tent. Moses told his father-in-law all that Yahweh had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardships that had come on them on the way, and how Yahweh delivered them. Jethro rejoiced for all the goodness which Yahweh had done to Israel, in that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, Blessed be Yahweh, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of Pharaoh, who has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Dawn, verses 11 through 20, please.
Now I know that Yahweh is greater than all the gods, for in the very thing in which they behaved proudly, he was above them. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and other sacrifices to offer to Elohim. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before Elohim. And so it was on the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood before Moses from morning until evening. So when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did for the people, he said, What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit, and all the people stand before you from morning until evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, Because the people come to me to inquire of Elohim. When they have a difficulty, they come to me, and I judge between one and another, and I make known the statutes of Elohim and his laws. So Moses' father-in-law said to him, The thing that you do is not good. Both you and these people who are with you will surely wear yourselves out, for this thing is too much for you. You are not able to perform it by yourself. Listen now to my voice, and I will give you counsel, and Elohim will be with you. Stand before Elohim for the people, so that you may bring the difficulties to Elohim, and you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which they must walk, and the work that they must do.
Thank you. John 21 through 27, please.
But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases, they can decide themselves. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this, and Elohim so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything he said. He chose capable men from all Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They served as judges for the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided themselves. Then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country.
Thank you. Okay. D, Exodus 19, 1 through 10, and Roy, 11 through 20, please. 11 through 25, Roy.
In the third new moon, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Mizraim, on this day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. For they set out from Rephidim and had come to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. So Israel camped there before the mountain. And Moshe went up to Elohim, and Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you are to say to the house of Yaakov, and declare to the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Mitzrayites, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And now, if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set apart nation. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel." And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yahweh had commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, "All that Yahweh has spoken, we shall do." So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Moshe, "See, I am coming to you in the thick cloud, so that the people hear when I speak with you and believe you forever." And Moshe reported the words of the people to Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Moshe, "Go to the people and set them apart today and tomorrow, and they shall wash their garments." Verse 11.
And let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day, Yahweh will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, "Beware that you do not go up on the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain." So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. He said to the people, "Be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman." So it came about on the third day when it was morning that there were thunder and lightning flashes and a thick cloud upon the mountain and very loud trumpet sound, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke, because Yahweh descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked violently. When the sound of the trumpet blew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him with thunder. Yahweh came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. Then Yahweh spake to Moses, "Go down, warn the people, so that they do not break through to the Lord, to Yahweh, to gaze, and many of them perish. Also let the priests who come near to the Lord, to Yahweh, to sanctify themselves, or else Yahweh will break out against them." Moses said to Yahweh, "People cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, 'Set bounds about the mountain and consecrate it.'" Then Yahweh said to him, "Go down and come up again, you and Aaron with you, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to Yahweh, or he will break forth upon them." So Moses went down to the people and told them.
Thank you. Okay, Jimmy, chapter 20, verses 1 through 10, please.
Okay. Chapter 20. The Ten Commandments. Then God spoke all these words, saying, "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, or any likeness of what is in heaven, or on the earth beneath, or underwater under the earth. You shall not worship them nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, inflicting the punishment of the fathers on the children, on the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing favor to thousands, to those who love me and they keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave you unpunished who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day, like today, to keep it holy. For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servants or your female servants, on your cattle or on your resident who stays with you.
Thank you. Okay, Roger, verses 11 through 21, and that will finish the Torah portion, the reading. And then we can go on to the Haftarah.
For in 6 days Yahweh made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that is, that your days may be long in the land that Yahweh Elohim is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife and his male servant or female servant or his ox or his donkey or anything that is your neighbor's. Now, when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain shaking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off. And Moses said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die." Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for Yahweh Elohim has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin." What verse till?
The next one, just verse 21.
The people stood far off while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where Elohim was.
Okay, thank you. Vicky, Isaiah 6, read verses 1 through 13, please.
In the year that sovereign Uzziyahu died, I saw Jehovah sitting on a throne high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the Haikal. Above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodesh is Jehovah of hosts. All the earth is filled with his esteem. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe to me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the sovereign, Jehovah of hosts. And one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth with it and said, See, this has touched your lips, your wickedness is taken away, and your sin is covered. And I heard the voice of Jehovah saying, Whom do I send, and who would go for us? And I said, Here am I, send me. And he said, Go, and you shall say to this people, hearing you hear, but do not understand, and seeing you see, but do not know. Make the heart of this people fat, and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and shall turn and be healed. Then I said, Jehovah, until when? And he answered, Until the cities are laid waste and without inhabitant, and the houses are without a man, and the land is laid waste, a ruin. And Jehovah has removed men far away, and the forsaken places be many in the midst of the land. But still there is a 10th part in it, and shall again be for burning, like a terebinth tree, and like an oak whose stump remains when it is cut down. The Kodesh seed is its stump.
Thank you. Debbie, Matthew 5, verses 17 to 20.
Sorry, I see I've got my name is twice on. I don't know what happened there. I battled to get on today. So
It's
please
okay.
delete one.
It's okay.
Okay, verse 13 to
Matthew 5, starting at verse 17 and ending at verse 20. It's just 4 verses.
Don't think that I have come to abolish the Torah or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to complete. Yes, indeed, I tell you that until heaven and earth pass away, not so much as a yud or a stroke will pass from the Torah, not until everything that must happen has happened. So whoever disobeys the least of these mitzvot and teaches others to do so will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever obeys them and so teaches will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness is far greater than that of the Torah teachers and the Pharisee, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me get everything recording here. And I'm going to go and share my Word document. Where is that? That's Audacity. Where's my Word document? Uh-oh. Okay. Wait. Come on. Where is my, oh, there's Microsoft Word. Okay. It says I'm about to share Microsoft Word. And we are recording. I have to stop this. Wait a minute. I did this wrong. So let me end that. And I'm going to do that. All right, now back to the Word document and start the recording again. I'm sorry about this, guys. Sometimes me handling all this technology by myself is not a good idea. And I still didn't get it right. Let me see if I can move that down there. Oh, no. It's not going to let me. Huh. Goodness gracious. We'll try it again. Okay, I think that's the screen that I want now for the recording. Okay. Father, we thank you for this Shabbat, and I thank you for this teaching, and I thank you for the understanding that that you have shown us, and I just pray that only your words will flourish in your understanding and your truth, because you are the only one with the word, the understanding, and truth. And so, Father, let nothing of me or of anyone who speaks on your behalf, if it's their words, that nothing of them or their words will flourish, that only your word will come forth, because your kingdom is glorious and you prevail, Father, over everything. In Yeshua's name, amen. Okay, so this teaching is called the Abomination of Desolation, the central focus of the coming tribulation. I said here that believers are looking for one central event. We've had a lot of discussions in our group about this one central event, and it's partly why I decided we need to study it, because we are looking for one central event which will tell us where we are in regard to the amount of time before Yeshua will return to save us and restore his kingdom. The only event that can time his return is the fulfillment of the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet in in Daniel 9 and in Matthew 24:15. This is because the preceding explanation in Matthew 24, given by Yeshua, which also happens in Mark and Luke 21, does not begin with a specific prophetic event. Rather, We are told to watch for wars, rumors of wars, famines, pestilences, and false prophets, with no event to watch for that kicks these off at the start of the coming 7-year tribulation. And when Yeshua said these things are just the beginning of sorrows, he was telling us that we're not going to know exactly when the desolation is going to happen. And so he told us these are just the beginning of sorrows, and then he explained or launched into what is going to be part of that in the beginning before the desolation, which is the persecution of his followers. That is going to be one way that we're going to know, but not know how long we've been in this situation. We can't know anything until the abomination of desolation occurs. So the first 3.5 years of the 7-year time period is commonly referred to as Jacob's sorrows, and that is Jacob being sorrowful over what his sons do to each other. In Matthew 24:9, it says, "They will deliver you up to oppression and will kill you. You will be hated by all of the nations for my name's sake." Mark 13:9 says, "But watch yourselves, for they will deliver you up to councils," or Sanhedrins, it says in some versions, "and you will be beaten in synagogues. You will stand before rulers and kings for my name's sake, for a testimony to them." And in Luke 21:12 it says, "But before all these things they will lay their hands on you and will persecute you, delivering you up to synagogues and prisons, bringing you before kings and governments or governors for my name's sake." The persecution to come then will not be marked with a specific event. I don't care how many pre-trib rapturists there are out there. First of all, there's no such thing as a rapture. So definitely there's no pre-trib rapture because there's no rapture. God has a whole other plan than, taking some people off the earth while some of the other ones get to suffer. There's just no such plan in Yahweh's kingdom, never has been from the beginning, and never will be. The persecution to come will not be marked with a specific event. That, any event that we can be watching for, which will tell us when the exact time of the 7-year tribulation has arrived. And going off script here, this is because it's what Yeshua told his disciples. It's not for us to know the timing. It's not for us to know that. That he's going to let us know when we can know. And that's with the abomination of desolation. So there are days, months, and years counts provided by Daniel and John in Revelation for the second half of the tribulation, but not for the first half. Believers have been persecuted for 2,000 years, so it will be unknown to us when the first half has commenced, and it's in the first half that the final persecution of Yahweh's and Yeshua's believers will happen. So the lack of an event for the beginning of Jacob's sorrows means we simply must continue watching, praying, and being occupied with Yeshua's kingdom business, doing what he's told you to do that benefits his kingdom, until the only event which will tell us where we are in the timeline appears. That one specific event, which will be our sign that we are only 3.5 years away from his arrival, is the abomination of desolation found in Daniel 9:27. Now, I want to warn you that the interpretation I will present here will likely be very different to what you have been taught. So please just consider the information. And I'm going to post this on the messianicmessage.com so you can go back to it again. And also be aware that I will be using the term the Jews. This term does not mean all Jews. It means the Jews who deny Yeshua as their Messiah, God, and King, and those Jews in political and religious leadership who will be leading the way for Jerusalem to rule the world. There are many Jews who accept Yeshua's messiahship and that he is God and King over all Israel. And I don't mean those folks. This section is titled The First He. There are two He's in Daniel 9:27 in the Masoretic text. The Jerusalem altar, of course, will be central to everything else that happens during the tribulation, both for believers and non-believers. And the second He will do something different than the first He in regard to the altar in Jerusalem. So regarding what the first He does, it says in Daniel 9:27, He will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. So we're going to study two words from this sentence, confirm and many. And let's start with confirm. The word confirm is Strong's H1396, and the Hebrew word is gabar. And it means actually, it says to be strong, or by implication, to prevail. It can also be translated as strengthen or prevail, but it's most often translated as confirm. But which word of the three is correct? Well, I suggest the best word is prevail. And here is what the sentence says when using prevail instead of confirm or strengthen. He shall prevail in a covenant with the many for 1 week. So now I'm going to have to explain, why is prevail the best word? Well, it's because it describes something that has happened in the family of Jacob, which is what this is all about, in the past. Something that must happen again, because Yahweh always works in patterns, so we can understand what we witness. In 1 Chronicles 5:1, it says, And the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but since he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel, and the genealogy is not to be counted according to the birthright. For Judah prevailed among his brothers, and from him came the chief ruler, but the birthright was Joseph's. How will Judah prevail in the end of days? It will happen because of the Revelation 13 Judeo-Christian beast. Revelation 13:11 says, I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and it had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. The only two religions that claim the lamb are Judaism and Christianity, and they each claim him differently and in perverted ways. These two horns then tell us this beast is a Judeo-Christian beast, and it exercises all the authority of the first beast before him and causes the earth and those dwelling in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed And he does great wonders so that he makes fire come down from the heavens onto the earth in the sight of men. And I'm going to interrupt here and suggest that this fire coming down from the heavens onto the earth is actually coming onto the land, because gay in Greek is also eretz in Hebrew, which can mean earth, but it also means the land. And who brought fire down from heaven? Elijah. And where did he bring it? Into Israel, onto the altar. But it was not the altar in Jerusalem. But I believe this fire coming down from heaven to the earth or to the land is coming down in the sight of men to the altar in Jerusalem. And it deceives those dwelling on the earth because of the miracles which were given to it to do before the beast, saying to those dwelling on the earth that they should make an image to the beast who had the wound by a sword and lived. And there was given to it to give a spirit to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might both speak and might cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So right here is a little clue we'll have to talk about in another teaching about this image of the beast. There's a beast, then there's an image of the beast. And it causes all, both great and small, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark on their right hand or in their foreheads, even that not any might buy or sell except those having the mark or the name of the beast or the number of its name. And here is wisdom. Let him, having reason, count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and its number is 666. The Jewish beast man, also known as Antichrist, will operate from Jerusalem. This is a Judeo-Christian beast. After the rise of this beast, with the cooperation between the Jews in Jerusalem and the Christians in America, which we are seeing right now, Judah will rise up once again trying to prevail over Joseph. You see, that's why that word prevail, he shall prevail in a covenant. That's why prevail is a better word there. Judah prevailed among his brothers before. He's going to try to prevail among his brothers again. Now, who is Joseph in the end of days? Well, Joseph is also known as the house of Ephraim, and that house represents believers in Jesus, Yeshua, or commonly called Christians. For the context of when Judah prevailed over Joseph, we must return to Genesis, when Judah prevailed over Joseph by sending him to Egypt. So what 1 Chronicles 5 is talking about there, when Judah prevailed, it's referencing what Judah did to Joseph, sending him to Egypt. The beast from the tribe of Judah will again try to prevail over Joseph in the end of days. So that's why the word prevail, I believe, is a better word. Now, this brings us to the many. And the word for many is rob. It's Strong's H7227. And it just means a bunch of stuff like, abundant and abound and enough, full, great, many. But this word rob, is the same word used for the Arab rob, the multitude that left Egypt with the Israelites in Exodus 12:38. The word rob is just a contraction, a shortened version of this three-letter Hebrew root word, which means to cast together. Rob is a people that are cast together. They're all lumped together in one word. In other words, it's a biblical stereotype. And for the purposes of the beast, everyone who is not of his ethnic group, the beast's ethnic group, the Jews, will be cast together into another category called non-Jews. So the beast will make a covenant between the Jews and non-Jews, in which Christians don't fit into that. I believe many people will make covenant with the beast, but then you can't really call them Christians, because Christians believe in Yeshua. They don't believe in the Antichrist. Now, this is an obvious statement, but I have to make it because Yahweh's altar must exist and be operational in Jerusalem so that the events of Daniel 9:27 can come to pass. And at this altar, some kind of a covenant will be made by the beast man described in Revelation 13, and he will make a covenant between Jewish religious mystery Babylon and the Rab, the non-Jewish multitude. And this may take the form of a mimicking of Exodus 24 in a similar ceremony at the altar on Temple Mount. In Exodus 24, this ceremony happened at Mount Sinai, but if this becomes like a template for this covenant, then it will be made at the altar on Temple Mount. Let's read about what Moses did in Exodus 24, starting in verse 3. Moses came and told the people all of Yahweh's words and all the ordinances, and all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which Yahweh has spoken we will do. Moses wrote all of Yahweh's words and rose up early in the morning and built an altar under the mountain and 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of cattle to Yahweh. Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. He took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that Yahweh has spoken we will do and be obedient. Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, look, this is the blood of the covenant which Yahweh has made concerning you with all these words. Now here is the mockery of that. The beast came and told the people all of Mystery Babylon's words found in the teachings of Judaism, and all the ordinances, and all the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which Mystery Babylon has spoken we will do, either by converting to Judaism and denying Yeshua, or agreeing to adhere to the Noahide laws. The beast wrote all Mystery Babylon's words and rose up early in the morning and built an altar under the mountain and 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. That's, the 12 tribes will be represented somehow, perhaps through the 12 tribes flags that adorn every synagogue. The Jews claim all 12 of the tribes, even though they are only 4 of the tribes. They still claim everybody. Excuse me. And he sent young men of the children of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of cattle to Mystery Babylon. The beast took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. He took his book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people, and they said, all that Mystery Babylon has spoken we will do and be obedient. The beast took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, look, this is the blood of the covenant which Mystery Babylon has made with you concerning all these words. That's the mockery. Now, maybe it won't happen that way, but you're getting the point of what the beast is going to do with the people, making them in covenant with Mystery Babylon. But there will be disagreement about this covenant, which will set up a conflict with believers who do not want to be included in the beast's covenant, which will deny Yeshua as Messiah, God, and King of all Israel. This disagreement will result in the persecution of believers in Yeshua. Those opposed to the beast man's covenant worldwide will be represented by the two witnesses in Jerusalem, whose purpose will be, as it says in Revelation 13, Yahweh will give power to his two witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. It is here now that Matthew 24:14 will be fulfilled, which is that the good news of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world for a testimony to all the nations. And then the end will come. The good news will be preached before the midpoint of the tribulation, which starts in Matthew 24:15, which tells us the event that will show us where we are in the timeline of the 7 years. We won't truly know until this happens, until the abomination of desolation happens. It's not certain to me that when this beast man does this ceremony, that it will be, that the ceremony itself will be done at the start of the 3.5 years. I'm not certain about that. I think it will, but I'm not certain about that. After the covenant has been established and the persecution and killing of Yeshua's believers and the two witnesses have taken place, the second he of the Masoretic text will attack Jerusalem. Now, I've been talking about the Masoretic text, and so we're going to stick with the Masoretic, but I'm going to tell you something about the Brenton Septuagint. The Abomination of Desolation is the event that will mark the second 3.5 year time period, frequently referred to as the Great part of the tribulation, and it will also be the event which triggers the ingathering. Only Daniel and Yeshua have spoken of this. Matthew 24:15. When, therefore, you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. And then Mark 13:14, but when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing where it ought not, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. So the sentence structure based in the Masoretic texts references the word he twice in Daniel 9:27. But should that word he even be there at all? You see, the Brenton Septuagint doesn't use the word he at all. Here's from the Brenton, Daniel 9:27. 1 week shall establish the covenant with many, and in the midst of the week my sacrifice and drink offering shall be taken away, and on the temple shall be the abomination of desolations, and at the end of time an end shall be put to the desolation. So these are very different wordings between the Masoretic and Septuagint texts. The Brenton says the covenant with the many will be established without using the word he, and then announces that Yahweh's sacrifice and drink offering shall be taken away without using the word he. Neither text tells us how the sacrifices and drink offerings will be taken away unless we examine another word, overspreading, or sometimes wing, as translated from the Masoretic text, but which does not exist in the Septuagint. And I think if we study both texts together, we'll get to a better understanding. What is the overspreading or the wing in the Masoretic text? Well, that is the word kanaf. It's Strong's H3671, and it means specifically of a bird or army, a wing. Okay, so kanaf is something that spreads out and has something to do with either a bird spreading its wing or an army spreading out over a specific area, and depending on the context. It's something that spreads out over something else. Now, kanaf in this context is more probably an army. First, we must understand that Daniel 9:27 prophesies this desolation only for the end of days, and this has not yet been fulfilled. But Daniel 11:31 gives a little more detail about the definition of the abomination of desolation, because it has been fulfilled. It's been fulfilled, so we can get an understanding of what will happen at the end of days. It was fulfilled once before. It has one more time to be fulfilled. Daniel 11:31. Forces will stand on his part, and they will profane the sanctuary, even the fortress, and will take away the continual burnt offering. They will set up the abomination that makes desolate. So now history tells us how Daniel 11:31 was fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes IV, when he shut down Yahweh's altar by sacrificing a pig on it and setting up a statue of Zeus next to it. The act of a foreign invader stopping the sacrifices, followed by setting up its god next to Yahweh's altar, is the abomination that makes desolate. Babylon and Rome both shut down Yahweh's altar, but without setting up a statue of their gods. Yahweh did not declare that they had made an abomination that makes desolate. What Antiochus Epiphanes did set the pattern and defined what the abomination of desolation is. It's the two-part stopping the sacrifices. That's the abomination. I'm going to show you that that's, in another scripture, or, having to do with abominations on Temple Mount, and setting up that which desolates. And that came about by the overspreading, the kanaf, the attack by the Greek army, which allowed Antiochus Epiphanes IV to set up Zeus next to Yahweh's altar. That sign was important because it not only conquered Jerusalem, it was the evidence that Jerusalem's conquered. But that sign, that statue of Zeus, conquered and subjugated Yahweh in favor of Zeus. And what does this mean? Well, this specifically shows that Yahweh either does not exist or is just one God of many. That's what that means. The end times abomination of desolation will also come from an outside invading force, and its sign, which it's going to bring with it, will be one of conquering and subjugating Yahweh to their God. Now, there's a building, the Dome of the Rock, that now stands on Temple Mount, which will play a role in bringing the invading army. That building, along with the Al-Aqsa Mosque, will be the reason the invading army will come to destroy Yahweh's altar. But before I tell you which army will do this, I want to explain why the Masoretic texts, first and second he's, are two different figures, not one, as is explained in all commentaries and in all pulpits. There is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the Jews behaved regarding Yahweh's daily offerings. Never in Scripture did any king of Judah or any Levitical priest or any Jew stop the sacrifices and offerings at Yahweh's altar. Now, they did a whole bunch of other horrible things around it. They stood up idols next to it, and they even moved it out of its place in 2 Kings 16. That's in the story of Ahaz. And then you have Ahaz's grandson, Manasseh, who was even worse than Ahaz. But no Jew ever stopped the sacrifices, the daily sacrifices, the burnt offering and the drink offering. We must follow and adhere to the patterns that Yahweh gave us for our understanding. That's why he gave us the patterns, so that we can look back and say, okay, what's happened in the past? Isaiah say, you want to know what happens in the end? Go back to the beginning. What happened back there? We follow and adhere to the patterns that Yahweh gave us for our understanding. The Jewish beast will follow this pattern to not desolate the altar halfway through the 7-year tribulation period. Let's read about the worst king in Judah's history in 2 Kings 21. Verse 1. Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hephzibah. And he did the evil in the sight of Yahweh after the abominations of the heathen. See, abominations were done there, whom Yahweh cast out before the sons of Israel. For he built up again the high places which his father Hezekiah had destroyed. Hezekiah was Ahaz's son. And he reared up altars for Baal and made an Asherah, as Ahab, king of Israel, did. And he worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. And he built altars in the house of Yahweh, of which Yahweh said, in Jerusalem I will put my name. And he built altars for all the host of the heavens in the 2 courts of the house of Yahweh. And he made his son pass through the fire, and observed times, and used fortune tellers. And he dealt with familiar spirits and wizards. He worked much wickedness in the sight of Yahweh to provoke him to anger. And he set a graven image of the Asherah which he had made in the house of which Yahweh had said to David and to Solomon his son, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. Yahweh is making sure that we all know exactly where Manasseh put that Asherah pole. It's right there at the temple. And he said, I will not again make the feet of Israel wander any more out of the land. This is Yahweh speaking to Solomon and David. That they won't wander any more out of the land which I gave their fathers, only if they will be careful to do according to all that I have commanded them, and according to all the law that my servant Moses commanded them. By the way, if you want to inherit the land, and that is our inheritance, it ain't heaven. You want to inherit the land and go to the promised land, you've got to be obeying the law. I'm just going to put this in here. But they did not listen. And Manasseh seduced them to do more evil than the nations ever did, whom Yahweh destroyed before the sons of Israel. Well, so why didn't Yahweh say that Manasseh had caused an abomination that made desolate, when he actually did put an idol next to the altar? It is because Manasseh still kept the morning and evening burnt offerings going. Now, there is a religion in Iran that has a Messiah figure who believes Jerusalem belongs to him. I'll just give you a spoiler alert. He's an Amalekite. He's from Amalek. Iran, which is, ancient Persia in scripture, is the leader of a modern coalition of Middle East nations who are the king of the north in Daniel 11:40-45. Now, this is in the same chapter where Antiochus Epiphanes IV was prophesied to perform the abomination of desolation that I read to you from Daniel 11:31. The attack prophesied in Daniel 11:40-45 on Israel and Jordan and all countries has not yet been fulfilled in all of history. But Iran will fulfill it and bring with them the Shiite 12th Imam Messiah to Jerusalem. Now, they won't bring a statue. Rather, most probably, they will bring the Iranian flag of conquering, the lion and sun flag. This flag has an image of a lion on it, which is also a pointer back to Babylon. The sun rising from the lion's back is the same sun worshipped in ancient Babylon. But now we're going to talk about the Great Escape, because the attack on Jerusalem will end the Jewish persecution of Christians, only to replace it with the Shiite Islamic version of Christian persecution. Now, if you've read the papers, you know what Iranians do to Christians. But Yahweh has a plan for his people's escape, starting in Matthew 24:15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. You see this attack happen? I mean, and it's going to be sudden. You see it happen, it just don't even grab anything. Don't go to the field to turn back, and if you're in the field, don't go back to take your clothes. Woe to those who are with child and to those who give suck in those days. It's going to be a hard flight out of Judea. But pray that your flight is not in the winter, nor on the Sabbath day, for then shall be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Both Matthew and Mark have further instructions about this, which I don't have time to address here. Just know that the abomination of desolation is set up in Jerusalem, and when that happens, you're just to flee from wherever you are. If you're in Judea, right away. If you're out in the world, you might want to pack your go bag, but you might want to start fleeing them, and I'm going to show you that in the timing. Yeshua said to flee to the mountains, but not to the mountains of Israel, west of the Jordan River. That's also called the West Bank. Those will also be under the control of Shiite Iran. So no, flee to the mountains east of Jerusalem, where Ezekiel 20, verses 33-38 tells us that Yahweh will separate the rebels from the righteous, those who he won't allow to enter the land, from those that will enter, and where his people will escape from the king of the north. This will happen in the wilderness of the peoples, in Edom and Moab. And if you look on a satellite map, you can see a prominence of the profile of an eagle, and you can see that eagle's two wings, and those two wings cover Edom and Moab. And we read about how the Lord delivered Israel on eagle's wings. That's going to be repeated. I didn't put that in here, but that's going to be repeated. Jeremiah 16:14 says, "Behold, the days come, says Yahweh, that it will no more be said, as Yahweh lives, who brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but as Yahweh lives, who brought up the children from the land of the north and from all the countries where he had driven them. I will bring them again into their land that I gave to their fathers." This is the greater Exodus. But just as in the first Exodus, Yahweh's people will take the same route as before through Edom and Moab. Ezekiel 20, verse 33, "As I live, says the Lord Yahweh, surely with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out, I will be king over you. I will bring you out from the peoples, and will gather you out of the countries in which you are scattered, with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out. I will bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and there I will enter into judgment with you face to face. Just as I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so I will enter into judgment with you, says the Lord Yahweh. I will cause you to pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. And I will purge out from among you the rebels and those who disobey me. I will bring them out of the land where they live, but they shall not enter into the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am Yahweh." Well, Edom and Moab is the wilderness where Yahweh's woman will flee to, and I should have added in here that Daniel 11:40-45 says that Edom and Moab will escape the king of the north. Revelation 12:6 says the woman fled into the wilderness. That's the wilderness of Ezekiel 20:33-38, where she has a place prepared by God, that there they may nourish her 1,260 days. And so there will be another Exodus. But there will also be some from Judea who will not flee. Isaiah 4, verse 2. "In that day, Yahweh's branch will be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land will be the beauty and glory of the survivors of Israel." It will happen that he who is left in Zion and he who remains in Jerusalem shall be called holy, even every one who is written among the living in Jerusalem, when the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion. What are we watching right now? The rise of secular Zionism. That filth is going to be washed away. And he will purge the blood of Jerusalem from within it by the spirit of justice and by the spirit of burning. So ironically, after being among the Jewish leadership that tried to kill the two witnesses, and they were the ones that orchestrated the persecution of believers in Yeshua, these people that stay behind in Jerusalem will find themselves in the same position the two witnesses were in. And how is that? Well, they will find Yeshua, and the second he will likely try to persecute and kill them too. Zechariah 12:10 says, "I will pour on David's house and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplication. And they will look to me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and will grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for his firstborn." When does this happen? It happens after a war. Zechariah 12, 1 through 9. Verse 11, in that day there will be a great mourning in Jerusalem, like the mourning of Hadadramon in the valley of Megiddon. Now, this is not referring to the Armageddon War. It's referring to where, how the mourning that happened after Josiah died in the valley of Megiddon. It was a great mourning because he was a righteous king. The land will mourn, every family apart, the family of David's house apart, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Levi apart, and their wives apart, the family of the Shimeites apart, and their wives apart, all the families who remain, every family apart, and their wives apart. By the way, we just read today in the Torah portion, clean yourself up and don't go and see your wives. The Jews that stay behind in Jerusalem will accept Yeshua as Messiah, God and King, and they will call on him saying, Baruch haba b'shem Yeshua. Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh. But they will need supernatural help to keep them from being killed for their testimony about Yeshua, God and King, just like the two witnesses had supernatural protection. And that's quite a plot twist, right? Yahweh will protect them in Jerusalem, as he will also protect all of his other people wherever they are on the earth as they flee, just like he did when they fled from Egypt. And he will protect them even after they get to Edom and Moab. Isaiah 4:3. And it will happen that he who is left in Zion and he who remains in Jerusalem shall be called holy, even every one who is written among the living in Jerusalem. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and shall have purged the blood of Jerusalem from within it, by the spirit of justice and by the spirit of burning, Yahweh will create over the whole habitation of Mount Zion and over her assemblies, plural, a cloud and smoke by day, and the shining of a flaming fire by night, for over all the glory will be a canopy. So now here's some timing, the when. We've been reading about the 1260 days, and there is a secondary number of months for the second half of the tribulation. In Revelation 12:6, it says 1260 days. But Daniel 12:11 says 1290 days from the time that the continual burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate is set up. Well, 1290 days corresponds to the start of the time that the Jews flee Jerusalem. That's probably around Purim, since historically it was at Purim when the Amalekite Haman wanted to kill them. So 1290 days in the future will be the return of Yeshua. This 1290 days will be also the signal to the exiles in the diaspora. That's everyone who believes in Yeshua, but they don't live in Israel. This is their signal that they also need to flee from where they are, but they've got, a longer time to, they got some time to prepare and some time to get to the wilderness and so forth. They got 30 days because it's exactly 30 days between Purim and Passover. The journey will be longer for them, of course, so they just need to get started as soon as possible. Revelation 12:14 says, and 2 wings of a great eagle were given to the woman so that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nurtured for a time and times and half a time. That's 1260 days from the serpent's face. So from the 1290 days to the 1260 days, that's her time to flee. And we read about, Yahweh delivering Israel on eagle's wings. And here he says, 2 wings of a great eagle. In other words, he's amplifying the glory of his work, bringing everybody out of wherever they are, all over the earth, to the place where he's going to meet with them in the wilderness of the peoples, as foretold by Ezekiel 20:33-38. And Daniel 10 says, many will purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked will do wickedly. And none of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. And of course, we read in the book of Revelation about those who will purify their garments and make them white in the blood of the Lamb. And then I don't remember what chapter it is near the end of Revelation. It talks about the wicked continuing to do wickedly, and the righteous continuing to do righteously. I didn't put those scriptures in here. I probably should have. The place where Yahweh's people will gather is also the place where we will purify ourselves and prepare to enter the promised land, to live forevermore and eternally, with Yeshua as our ruling God and King on earth. So you don't need a rapture. You just need to follow God's instructions. But until then, Matthew 24:42 says, watch therefore, so just be paying attention, for you don't know in what hour your Lord comes. Matthew 24:44, therefore also be ready, for in an hour that you don't expect, the Son of Man will come. Mark 13:23, but you watch. Behold, I have told you all things beforehand. And that ends the teaching. All right. Dawn.
Wow. I'm gonna have to go back and listen again because my mind was going 90 miles an hour as you were talking, coming up with other things too. And so I didn't get to digest everything that you were saying because there was a lot. So I don't know if it was just me or if it was everybody. But what really stands out to me, because I just listened to your message in the Midrash from last night, and I loved the part about the lion and the bear, Babylon and Persia, and that being fresh in my mind. I think it's just absolutely no coincidence that you did that last week and you got off that subject and went to this week. I think it's totally a God thing, and I'll tell you why. Because you said that Babylon was the lion, which totally makes sense. And who did Babylon pass through? I totally believe it's through Greeks and then to Rome, the beast. But then the bear is Persia, which is Muslim. And so bear with me here. I'm trying to explain it to where it'll make sense to somebody besides me. But Daniel, where was he thrown when he would not stop praying 3 times a day? He was thrown to the lions, right? By Nebuchadnezzar, the lion. There's Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, the lion. What was Daniel doing because he could not do the sacrifices in Jerusalem on Temple Mount? Instead, it was the sacrifice of prayer 3 times a day. So is it possible? And I'm just saying, because we need to keep our minds open to other alternatives besides what we've been told over and over. There has to be an altar on Temple Mount. There has to be the temple so that people can go and be offering the sacrifices. There have to actually be blood sacrifices going that get stopped. Really? Maybe not. Maybe, and this is the first time I ever thought of this, maybe the anti-Messiah is going to seek to stop the sacrifice of prayer 3 times a day that the Jews have been doing forever under penalty of death, just like Daniel was told to stop praying and he did it anyway. And so then he was thrown into the lion's den, into Babylon, trying to kill him because he would not stop the sacrifice of prayer. So is that a possibility? 3 times a day. And then what is the next? And then after that, what happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? They were thrown into the fiery furnace. We're told that in the end of time, under the anti-Messiah, we're going to have to pass through the fire, purified by fire. And that was done also by the lion, by Nebuchadnezzar. And then when did the bear come into the picture? That would be the Purim story, Persia, where they were told to go out and they were given permission to kill all of all Israel, actually, not just the Jews. They were throughout his whole entire kingdom. And so is the lion, Babylon, going to be first, and then eventually the bear, Persia, is going to be given permission to kill? And so that I just think the whole lion and the bear that you talked about last week comes together and plays into this, because we see the first time, Daniel representing the Jews praying 3 times a day as a sacrifice. And then Nebuchadnezzar also set up the golden Abomination of Desolation. I mean, he set it up not on Temple Mount, but is that a picture of the Abomination of Desolation? Because he was going to make people under pain of death pray to it, right? And that's where the fire came in. So anyways, those are just my preliminary thoughts. I have a lot more, but I just thought I'd throw that out there as just an alternative to be thinking about, that if somebody goes and stands on Temple Mount and says that the Jews are praying to the wrong God, you can't be praying 3 times a day or whatever. Now I'm going to set up this abomination here and you're going to pray to me because I am God. Is that a possibility of stopping the sacrifice without there actually having to be? Because if we're all waiting for blood sacrifices to happen again, and this happens instead, maybe we should think that maybe this could be it too. And then the Purim, like you said, with the Islam killing people, maybe that's the picture of the Purim. They're given permission to go out and kill by Babylon. So anyways, the lion and the bear work together to destroy true Israel. And so I think that's how it all connected. Anyways, I'll let others go while I'm kind of thinking of these other things. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dawn. The lion is the one that will attack Christians. That's the mystery Babylon. That's the attack on Christians. The bear, Persia, is the attack on not only on Christians then, but also on Jews. So where Daniel was, he was in the diaspora. And the pattern is that when you're in the land, there's an altar. That's always been the pattern in Scripture. When there's been Jews in the land, there's been an altar. The only time that hasn't happened has been since 1948. So given the pattern of Scripture about an actual functioning altar, and the fact that Antiochus Epiphanes is the one who fulfilled Daniel 11:31, and he fulfilled it by shutting down an actual altar, shows us that there will be an actual altar. Now, they're not necessarily going to stop the Jews praying. The Jewish beast man is not necessarily going to stop the Jews praying in Israel. They're going to go to the temple for the purpose of doing that. And so I have considered what you've said. I've heard other people say that, in the past, and I've considered that. But given that the patterns are always about an actual altar, a functioning altar, I just have to say I disagree with you on that part. John.
Well, just real quick, can I speak to that real quick? Like I said, this is just an alternative that if we did see something like this, we should probably not dismiss it, because and if we see, obviously, if we see somebody start doing sacrifices on Temple Mount, obviously that's it. I'm just trying to encourage people to not be dogmatic in this has to be or it's not it, because a lot of times we don't recognize it until it's here. And I see that problem with the Christians. It has to be this, the rapture has to come first. It has to be that, or it's not it. And then when something like the COVID vaccine comes, the Christians take it because, oh gosh, we're not supposed to be here. And so this is not part of the beast system or anything like that. And so I just think that we need to be looking at other alternatives, and that this is just one that I threw out there. And I have never, ever heard anyone compare the 3 times daily prayer as the sacrifice that's going to be stopped, as though they tried to stop Daniel from praying 3 times a day or throw him in with the lions. And so I was just connecting the lion's den with what you said, Babylon trying to destroy the people, and then the bear being Purim trying to destroy the people, as 2 patterns in scripture. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just throwing an alternative out there for people to be watching.
Well, here's the thing that Christians are dogmatic about, and that is that there's not going to be any sacrifices. They have that belief that the sacrifices are done away, and so the people that I've heard say this are people who are, of that vein. But you're right, Persia will come in and stop the 3 times daily prayer of the Jews, or they'll try to. But the Jewish beast man, the Antichrist, won't do that. John.
Kimberly, I'm so excited about this particular teaching today, because as Dawn said, there's so much in it. And it's really a question of keeping eyes wide open, and hence, why we have these discussions. And I'm so pleased that you have brought this particular subject today. Now, I do agree that there will be no rapture. I have heard it so much being said in the past by preachers, but always in my spirit, I always felt there was something wrong about this. But the important thing that you raised today is that the ingathering will be at the midpoint of the tribulation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I really and truly, I would like a lot of explanations on Daniel 11. But before going there, because I can see Roy or D has got their hands up. In terms of patterns, what I have learned today is a number of things. and I'll just briefly summarize them. The first thing is that there will be a two-part tribulation. There will also be a two Exodus, one to come. One has already been, one to come. There are two he's in the Masoretic text in terms of creating a firm covenant, and also the other he, as you mentioned, is the one who causes the desolation of the abomination of desolation. There are these two beasts have got two horns, so we have Judeo-Christians. There are two antichrists, which we've just mentioned. Two Gog-Magog wars. Two brothers with the initials J in English, presumably it's Y in Hebrew. That's Judah and Joseph. In Hebrew, presumably it's Yehuda and Yosef. Two events whereby that I mentioned before. One will be the making of the covenant, and then the causing of the abomination. So there's two events there. There are also two persecutions, also two number of days. So we have 1260 and 1290. All these things, most of these things I learned today from you, and I'm just summarizing them. Two witnesses as well, two houses, two wings, two visits, obviously, which is known or given by Yeshua, the first visit and the second one to come. So I have learned a hell of a great deal here today, but I do have lots of questions when we come to Daniel chapter 11. And then maybe Roy or Dee can share what they'd like to share now. Thank you, Kimberly.
Okay, that's thank you. Roy or Dee?
Yes. What I think is I just have a question about the sacrifice. It's interesting that they could stop the sacrifice at all. Now, in the temple, the sacrifice was outside. That was the first thing you saw, right? It was like, you had your they had to do that outside. They had the altar outside, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so they had to bring a lamb and butcher it, and then put it on the altar and sacrifice it. Okay, then when you go into the temple itself, then you get to the holy and the holy of holies, right? And only the high priest could go in there. All right. It's interesting that they stopped the sacrifice that was on the outside. So it was like they didn't go into the temple. They didn't go where the presence was. And
You're
it's
talking about the attackers, right? You're talking about
yeah,
Antiochus?
yeah, yeah. And it's like, okay, so this is the sacrifice. I don't know how to say it. I think it's just really strange that all this happens outside and not inside the temple. It said they desecrated that the temple. They took, and there was one or two times when foreign kings came in and took all the implements out of the temple. You see where I'm getting at? It's like the sacrifice is it's like the catalyst of what goes on in the rest of the temple grounds, so that they can, their sins can be forgiven and things like that. I don't I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I think it's really strange that it points to the sacrifice. I mean, why didn't they just go into the temple and just they had they had to they had to stop the sacrifice in order for everything else to stop. And
That's because the sacrifices are primary, because of the altar. That's because the altar is the sign of God that he owns the earth. And so those who want to have Zeus own the earth, they have to prove that they can conquer Yahweh. If Yahweh can be conquered, then he's not the owner of the earth, right? You
right,
have defeated him. That's why the altar and what happens at the altar is central.
yeah, yeah, for sure. That it's just so in other words, the person who attacks the altar knows that that's where it starts. I mean, why didn't he attack, the people in the courtyard, or things like that? But we went right. So you're saying the sacrifice is the heart of the matter, and and that's where it starts. That's where your relationship with Yeshua starts. As a
Yes,
sacrifice.
yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
see, in the
I'm just.
history in the history of the Jews, aside from the fact that they were doing all these other abominations, their identity is tied up with that altar and those sacrifices. That's why they've been pushing to build the temple since they got Israel in 1948,
Oh,
because their identity is not as part of the 12 tribes.
mm,
Their identity is that altar.
mm,
We're talking about Zionism, this Zionist thing that's going on between the Jews and America. We're talking about all of their identity being tied up in them having that altar, because they believe that when that altar comes back, then they have Yahweh's favor, they have Hashem's favor, and that they can rule the world. And so the destruction of that is going to divest them of their separate southern kingdom of Judah Jewish identity. Now they're going to have to come to be believers in Messiah and be grafted back into the kingdom, which is actually it's 13 tribes.
mm-hmm.
But that can't happen until the abomination of desolation takes place. That's part of Yahweh dealing with them to make them come to grips that their identity is in his kingdom and not with that altar with the sacrifices. And I'm not saying that, the sacrifices are not needed. I'm just saying our identity is not tied up there. Because in Ezekiel 40 to 48, we learned that in the millennial kingdom, there's going to be sacrifices. The morning and the daily morning and evening lambs, that thing is going to happen again, along with sin offerings even. And so, but
Yeah.
that's an administrative thing of the kingdom. The altar is not our identity. The sacrifices on that altar is not our identity. The sacrifice that we should identify with is the one that Yeshua made.
Yeah. Once and for all.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I got one more thing
Okay.
that I got one more thing to comment on is that in um, Exodus 20, I was reading um, several years ago. I just decided to say, I'm going to read the Ten Commandments. I'm going to read Exodus 20. And, it says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, and he says, you shall not make a God for yourself out of anything in heaven above or earth beneath, or the water beneath. And it's like we had all over well, we had one especially in a city park here, and we had a monument of the Ten Commandments, and it had none of that in there. Like, you shall honor your father and your mother. There's a reward for doing that, and it's like the the monuments, or the you know like the I don't know if the Catholics um put that in, whatever, but it's like it's not there. There's so much of that. I would say, they call it the Decalogue, and I think the Bible calls it the Ten Commandments. And but it's like 10 words. It's saying there's so much more to that. When I was a child, I would look at that and I would go, all he does, all this is a bunch of do nots. You know, it didn't even say the first verses. I am the Lord your God, and which is very positive. There will be a reward for you if you honor your father and your mother. And I was so, I don't know, maybe I should have been, maybe I should be ashamed of myself, but I loved it when they took those monuments out. Everybody thought it was desecration, like, we're not going to have that anymore. And they wanted a big sign, for our city and things like that. But um, I am just so glad that they did that, because I think personally, I think every one of us should go, um, be a shining testimony walking down the street, you know, and just tell people what the 10 commandments are, you know, and 10 words, 10 loving words, you know, and it's like, why they they couldn't go up on the mountain, but God gave them those commandments. And if they would obey them, they would get along. People nowadays think, well, they don't know how to love people. They everything is screwed up in their minds, about love, and about, you just go to church and they say, well, the first commandment is that we should love God and love our neighbor. Yeah, I said, define love. They can't do it. So you got people going out and doing immoral things, you know, and I don't know if I've gone past my limit here. And
No,
I'm just trying to think. I'm just trying to think, as I'm speaking. But it's like, um, the church has hidden God, the real God. I mean, I've gone through I've gone through times where, we had a revival. That there were things that happened which were really good. People's marriages got turned around, which was really good. you know. But the word I know one church. I know one church that preaches the word. He goes, they and they go through one book at a time. It isn't perfect,
Verse by verse.
verse by verse, and it's like he tells all the Bible stories. He expounds on it. He's not perfect, but he knows Hebrew. He knows the writings. He doesn't believe half of it. He doesn't believe what the Jews say in a lot of it, um, but I think it's really important to read the Bible together and to study it. To have these midrashes that we're having, and these things are just so crucial. Whatever it helps us to read it and to study it and to think about it, and not to leave out any part of the Bible that we don't think, we'll just abbreviate it, and it's like, it's so important. So, anyway, I think I've gone around in a circle.
Thank you.
I just, the thing about the the sacrifice, and the thing about the commandments is that, you know, it's so beautiful. It isn't. It's supposed to draw you to want more. You know, it's supposed to be. Yeah, it's supposed to draw you in. It's like, I want more. There must be more. You know, and
Yes.
but anyway, that's just a few thoughts that I had. So you can
Thank
pray.
you. Thank you, Roy. Good thoughts.
Okay.
Dawn.
I think very profound thoughts. I'm going to go back to what you were first saying about the abomination of desolation. It first starts at the altar, stopping the sacrifices, right? Well, that was super profound because anybody that studied the sacrifices in the altar and everything, a very simplified version of it is it's a picture of our bodies where we give the sacrifice of praise, the sacrifice of prayer, and that is with our mouth. So you could equate the altar with our mouth, because what do? You eat the sacrifices off the altar. So the altar is our mouth where it begins. And if you think about the Yom Kippur sacrifice, it's sacrificed on the altar, and then you go into the Holy of Holies, which is equivalent of our heart, our being, into our insides, and you sprinkle the prayer there. So when you said that, as I was thinking about it and writing all of this down, Romans 10:9 is actually what we are told, that all of the sacrifice, and I'm not disagreeing, in the millennial kingdom there will be sacrifices. I'm not talking about that at all. Just that aside, um the sacrifices and the feasts and everything, we are told, are a shadow, but Yeshua is the fulfillment. Yeshua, they're a shadow of Yeshua. We're supposed to learn about Yeshua and ultimate salvation from them. They are not the ultimate salvation. Yeshua is, and they point to him. So Romans 10:9, if thou shalt confess with thy mouth the altar, and shall believe in your heart the Holy of Holies, God has raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. And so that right there is the Yom Kippur sacrifice, the sacrifice on the altar of our mouths and sprinkling of the blood inside the Holy of Holies, and you shall be saved. That was a picture of Yeshua and that. And so I think that that even more confirms that it is possible. What do we have to have in order to confess with our mouth that Yeshua is Messiah and then believe in our hearts? We have to have free speech. And so Daniel, they were trying to stop Daniel from praying, from his speech, from his public prayer, his public confession that he did in front of his window for all to see, and he didn't stop. And so they threw him into the lion's den. They were going to kill him because he would not obey. And so it is possible, I think, that the free speech is what the anti-Messiah is first going to try and take away, before he tries to set up, or at the same time that he tries to set up his abomination of desolation in the Holy of Holies. Now, whether all of this takes place literally on Temple Mount is possible, but and I think that it actually is going to be that way, but is the ultimate goal of what we see physically this spiritual, to shut up true believers, that they take the sacrifice of praise and the sacrifice of prayer away from the altar of their mouths, so that he can set up his own abomination of desolation in the Holy of Holies in our hearts. And so I just got really excited when you were saying that it all starts at the altar. It all starts with our mouth, with our speech, just like in Romans 10:9. You confess with your mouth and believe in your heart. You sacrifice on the altar and sprinkle the blood on your heart in the Holy of Holies. I just think that is super profound. Thank you, Roy. I think that what you said really sparked some understanding and connection between the spiritualness of salvation in Yeshua Messiah and the literalness of the sacrifices and the feasts and Yom Kippur that were supposed to point us to Yeshua and be a physical picture of a spiritual truth.
Okay, well, can I just give you something to think about?
It's meant to do that. Yeah,
Oh,
sure, you can give you something to think
okay.
about.
Okay, so in Hosea 14:2 and in Hebrews 13:15, we learned that what comes from our lips is our sacrifice. But what Paul says in Romans chapter 12, I believe that's 12:1. He says to make our, let me go over to there, Romans 12:1. Well, where are you, Romans? There you go. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, by the mercy of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service. So the altar is where we lay ourselves on there, and what comes from our lips is our sacrifice. And so I just wanted to give that as something else for you to consider.
I
And I
think that's
won't
what I said,
continue.
isn't it?
No,
I thought
you
that's what I
said our
said.
lips are the altar. You said our lips are the altar, but our
Well,
mouth
a
is the altar,
picture.
is what you said. You said our
Yeah,
mouth
yeah,
is the
it's a
altar,
picture.
but our lips are actually the sacrifice that's on the altar.
Okay, well, I don't know. That's
There's
kind
a
of
little
splitting
difference.
hairs, but that's what I meant,
Well,
that it starts
okay.
with our speech, because Romans 10:9 says it starts with our speech. We have to confess with our mouth, so that's the sacrifice on the altar. Okay, so our speech is the sacrifice on the altar, so that's where it begins, is at
Right.
the altar of our bodies, which contain our lips through which we speak the sacrifice. Then our hearts are also in our bodies, where the blood of Yeshua is sprinkled, so we believe in our hearts. So our bodies are a picture of the temple. We're told that our bodies are our temple. So if our bodies are our temple, as Roy was saying, it begins with our mouth, the altar, and goes
No, our
inside to the
mouth
Holy of
is, but our
Holies in our
mouth is
hearts.
not the altar. Our mouth is not the altar. Our heart is the altar, and our lips are the words that are on the altar of our heart, what we say with our mouth.
My point was that first you speak, then you believe in your heart, according to Romans 10:9. And so it starts at the altar, and then the priest starts at the altar and then goes into the Holy of Holies. So what Romans 10:9 is saying is it starts with you saying it and then believing it in your heart. So it follows the same pattern as the priest. The priest starts at the altar and goes into the Holy of Holies. Romans 10:9 says it starts with our speech and goes into our heart. So that was my comparison, not necessarily what the actual altar is, just the pattern.
Okay, thank you. Roger.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. So quite a bit here. I love this. I'm gonna actually have to the teaching go throughout the week here, like midweek, late at night, and listen to this all over again. And I'm gonna take this piece by piece, and I'm sure it'll be a continuous study, thought, walking through, following through, learning. Um, and so can we kind of have like a discourse, just so as if we're in person having a conversation? And what I want to really focus on is the abomination of desolation, but all of the talk around everything you guys have just said, we've been saying about the different comments and the different opinions, etc., about altar, sacrifice, etc. It's coming together. This is so good from every perspective, from every thought, from everyone. To be a chad and to be one and discuss all these things. I love it. I love everyone's input. It's very insightful. It's not only is it a light in a dark place for someone like me, but it also helps to put oil in my lamp, put oil in all of our lamps. And so I say that as a kind of a preamble, kind of to preface my thoughts here. So to ask a question, and we know that our heart is the altar, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so therefore, everything that we think, say, and do is our sacrifice, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so to go to um the subject of today's midrash about the abomination of desolation. So the enemy's ultimate goal is to shut down that altar, basically like with Daniel and like what the Antichrist will do in the last days, is to, and I mean they're trying to do with AI and everything else. They're trying to basically determine and make your thoughts. You can't think this, you can't think that, you can't say this, you can't say that, you know. And so like how Yeshua had said from the how what did Yeshua say? He said specifically from the heart the mouth speaks. What specifically? That's scripture, I believe, from the heart the mouth speaks. So the heart is the altar, and the goal is to defile your the sacrifice or your heart or both. And so shut it down as well, stop it, eliminate it. And that's what the enemy is trying to do, or change it, or defile it. And so my first question is the abomination that causes desolation, those are two separate things, correct? Or is it one event?
Say that again. I didn't.
The abomination that causes desolation, it is one
It's
event, or is it,
it's
or is
one
it two?
event, but it has two parts.
Okay, okay. And those, and so I to confirm in my mind, those two events, one has to do with sacrifice and the other has to do with the altar, or can you um expound on that again?
The first part is stopping the sacrifice. The second part is putting up the symbol of conquering. Antiochus Epiphanes put up a statue of Zeus. Zeus had conquered Yahweh. See, in ancient times, altars were all important because that altar represented the god that was being worshipped, and that god was the owner. As an altar represents ownership of the earth, and so
Okay.
Yahweh's definition of how to signify who owns the earth, among this is just one of his ways, but is that altar. So when somebody comes to shut that down, like Antiochus Epiphanes did, it's not just about shutting down the sacrifices, it's also about putting up the symbol of conquering. In the case of Antiochus Epiphanes, that was the statue of Zeus. And that's the only time in the past when that has been done, was when Antiochus, the Greek guy, did that, and then we have the Maccabees war against them. We're going to have
Question
that
there.
again. We're going to
First
have that
question.
again, and somebody's going to come and shut down the Jews who have worked so hard since 1948 to
Mhm.
be able to do their sacrifices. And that's going to get shut down, and another conquering symbol will be set up there. And I believe the conquering symbol of Shiite Islam is that flag with the lion of Babylon and the sun rising out of the back of that lion.
Okay. And so, so to go back half a thought, the the so two things I'm thinking about. One here is to the concept of what like Islam would think would be to conquer Zionism. Is that one way of thinking about it on a collective level, right?
Yes, if when um, when the king of the north comes, it will be to put an end to modern Zionism, this
Okay.
American Israeli thing that's going on.
Yes. Okay. Got it. I'm with you. So part two, second to that would be once they do that, like with the mark of the beast, it is to conquer individuals' altars, hearts by like I like what Don was saying by getting them to stop, like you were saying with Daniel, basically your individual your individual sacrifice of prayer, and I see them to not together but parallel or with each other. And so with the second individual sacrifice, a desolation be to extinguish your prayer, your thought life, your communication, your relationship with the Father, your
Right.
heart open.
Right. And what we've seen with the COVID vaccine, I got a number of phone calls from people saying that after they had taken that vaccine, they could not feel the Holy Spirit. And
Wow.
how can you pray? So the mark of the beast and the covenant made with the many will coincide. And so you will take the mark, and then you will and you don't have to be present in Jerusalem for the ceremony that makes the covenant. But if you go back and you look at how covenants are made, they're made with blood sacrifices. And so, um, you know, whoever takes the mark of the beast will, through that ceremony at some point, be in covenant with Mystery Babylon and the beast. And so, yes, that will shut down the prayers of their heart. But you know what? They haven't been praying to Yahweh anyhow. They haven't been praising Yahweh anyhow. Their heart has not been with Yahweh.
But they, oh yes, yes, but they could, like all of us, like all of us has had a point where we teshuva and gained a personal relationship with the Father. And so that will be on an individual level eliminated, and as well as a collective level eliminated. Correct? Is that a way of thinking about this? That's a way of I'm starting to think about this when with the reason for this climax, this culmination of the last days, and what starts off with the enemy trying to prevent. And then this is the second part. I'll go into this about what you said. Basically, what's the catalyst for the ingathering so that that doesn't happen, right? This individual and collective cutting off of the altar, of the heart altar.
Yes, well, when as an individual you accept that covenant by taking the mark of the beast, you become part of that collective, which is no longer redeemable.
Right. Okay, right, right. I see. Wow. I think I'm going to stop there, and thank you for continuing this theme of study from last week. We're also starting to see how what's going on in the world, and as these last days begin to culminate, how this dialogue, this conversation, this study, these this is all very important and very pertinent right about now. And the next thing I begin to study as I study with others is where are we on this timeline? And that was a thought when you were teaching is basically, do you have a timeline that we can follow along with?
Well, we're not going to know because, you know, we don't know how long the beast, the Bible doesn't tell us, it doesn't say 1260 days. It says 7 weeks from when, or yeah, 7 weeks or 7 years, weeks of years, from
Mhm.
when the covenant is made. Okay? But how many years before that will the beast man have been operating, convincing people to take his mark? See, that's the part that we don't know. But we can know when the altar gets shut down. And the reason that I really stick to there's an actual altar with actual sacrifices is because it's a visible thing that we're going to be able to see.
You got it. It's a
You know,
marker. Yeah.
when somebody's heart gets shut down, we can't see that.
Mm.
But this is an event that the whole world can actually be witness to. If
And
somebody is a believer in Brazil, for instance, and their lips and their heart and their altar and their temple gets shut down, and that's possible that there will be people who say they believe now, but then they will decide differently later on. So when they're in the spiritual sense, when their altar gets shut down,
you will know.
we're not going to know that. And
And Yeshua,
we're not going to be able to determine anything through the spiritual attrition of believers.
and Yeshua
But
said
we
it.
but we
Yeshua said that.
will be, yeah, but you're right. Yeshua said it, that the altar will be shut down. The abomination of desolation will happen, which will be an event that
Mm.
everyone can witness.
Mhm. Yes, yes, yes. I think I see this in levels from spiritual to physical to global to time wise from 2000 years ago, well, actually since Daniel. And I don't think that anyone is wrong. I think that there are bits and pieces to all of this. There are levels of understanding for all of this. And
Well,
it's just, it was really, yes.
yeah. Well, look, Roger, we're studying now the giving of the law, and next week will be the making of the covenant. But in the giving of the law, which, by the way, they had the law before the law was formalized. We just read that
Hmm.
in chapter 18 before there was, the giving of the law in chapter 20. that, Moses was adjudicating according to Yahweh's law. So
And
they
Abraham
had
had
that.
it.
Yeah, Abraham had it. And so we know that they already were following the law, but when the law was given and they saw the power of Yahweh, it scared them to death. The same fire and lightning and thunderstorm, that fire that was on the mountain, that was the smoke and the burning of the mountain, that was supposed to become tongues of fire that rested on them in the Exodus, so they would be filled with the Holy Spirit. But they backed away from it. And so there's always what's supposed to happen in the spiritual is supposed to manifest in the physical. But
Mhm.
sometimes Yahweh has to give us the physical and then it manifests in the spiritual. That altar that Moses is getting ready now to build has always been our heart. That tabernacle has always been the representation of our inner self before Yahweh. None of this is new in the New Testament. Paul had to explain it because he had Gentiles that didn't have a clue. And he had to tell them that they are the temple. But the congregation has always been the temple. That's always been true. That didn't become true. It's always been true. All of our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their bodies were temples to Yahweh, just like you and I are temples to Yahweh, but not so much individually as collectively. It has
Spiritually,
to be both. It has to be individually and collectively. Does that make sense?
it does. It does. And what I'm thinking of here, as you mentioned about the body and how it's always been, and you think we live in a physical world, but spiritually, it's been there, and it will be there right in the Book of Revelation on. My
Yes.
next my next thought would my next comment thought would be, and I could go on and on about this all day long, but I'll leave it to just this last one, and we'll pick this up later. And it has to do with the fact you mentioned that Daniel 11:31, the abomination that causes desolation, and how that is the start of the ingathering. And you mean ingathering, you mean the second greater Exodus, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And and that's where we'll be gathered in Moab and Edom, the eagle's wings. Um, this is picking back up from last week, like how Don had mentioned about the lion and the bear, and I'm just starting to see a bigger picture that's like a puzzle coming together. And there's each week there's like a new piece or two that is making a better understanding of a picture in my mind's eye. And so to go back to, so to continue with this also this ingathering, that's when the greater exodus starts. I call it a network effect because it will be. I think I'll leave it there for right now. So I'll ponder that and study that more. So basically, but again, that's when the greater exodus begins. That's
Okay.
where it begins.
Here's
That's
the difference between the first Exodus and the second greater Exodus. In the first Exodus, Yahweh led them out from one spot and led them up into, the wilderness that's here in Jordan, where they spent all those years.
yes.
In the second Exodus, he doesn't lead them all out from one place. That's the difference. He brings them from all over the world, but he leads them to the same place where they'll be gathered so that he can deal with them face to face. I am your
Question
God.
there.
You know I'm your God. And now I'm going to deal with you and put you under the rod. I'm going to judge you. And so that's what he's doing then in the wilderness. The same thing that he did before.
Okay, question there. Question there. And it was two parts. And I mean, this is what led me to come to Aqaba back in the day when it wasn't time. And so did you just mention two things? One about how like in the first Exodus, they came from one place and they went into the wilderness. This time around, there's what I see a network effect. I see just this from around the globe. There'll be as it says in the scripture, there'll be an exodus, a greater exodus from all the different parts of the earth. And
Right.
oh yes, thank you. And so my question there it would be is also is the timing split apart or separated, or is it one time? It's at 30 days that you spoke about from the 1260 to 1290, correct?
Yeah, the when the abomination of desolation happens, that means you've got 1290 days until Yeshua comes, until he's crowned king at some future Yom Teruah. 1290 days. But that's for those who live over here. For everybody else who lives out there, it's 1260 days of being in the wilderness. And then from there, that's 1260 days from when Yeshua will be crowned king at some future Yom Teruah. So you've got a 30-day gap there so that those who are out in the world can see this event and have enough time to travel to the wilderness, and God will get them there. He will lead them there. You won't do the leading there. You'll see that and you'll know. You'll just know you got to go. And so you've got that 30-day period in which everybody will make it. I don't know how that part is going to work out. That's God's job. That's
Yeah.
Yahweh's job to get everybody there.
Question
But in
there.
that 30-day period is when that's going to happen.
Okay, you just answered my question. So this phenomenon is a 30-day phenomenon window of like this, I won't say a Red Sea moment, but you know what I mean? This basically this event of the remnant from around the world in that 30 days getting to the safe place.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of this from week to week. And sister, thank you for the presentation and the boldness that Yahweh is giving you to be able to just share and continue this. And I know folks like myself and others come and go, and you know we're all sheep, and half the time we're all stubborn and hard-headed like our ancestors, like our parents. But the goal would be no matter what we say and do to be echad, and love each other. Thank you, and I I'll end it there. Thank you.
You're welcome. Dawn and then John.
Thank you for all of your insight and questions, Roger. I thought they were excellent. And Kimberly, I love the part about the greater Exodus in the 30 days. That totally makes sense to get to over there, wherever we're gathered over there, which I truly believe too. And so all of these pieces, as Roger was saying, are starting, they fit together little by little, and there's layers and layers and layers. So it's the whole thing. It's just not a simple, this is it. This is the way it is. It's just layers upon layers, wheels within wheels. And so I love, like Roger said, these discussions that we have, and the fact that you open all of these discussions to all of us and to our questions. And I believe that's a huge blessing. I know it is for me, and I believe it is for everyone else. So I do want to say thank you about that. And I also agree with you that the abomination of desolation is the marker that we should be looking for, because before that, there's no specific thing, as you pointed out in your message. that delineates the first 3.5 years in the end of days. And so I totally agree. And that's why this discussion on what could be involved with the abomination of desolation is such a great thing to get our minds open to possibilities aside from what we've all been taught since late great planet Earth back in the 1970s or whatever. So to actually dig into scripture and what scripture says and comparing the Old Testament and the New Testament and the pictures and the spiritual and the physical, I think are awesome. So thank you for opening this discussion and switching your message this week to switching gears to this, which I think actually is connected, like I said, to what you said last week. So I agree with that. And then also I was going to point out that I thought it was really cool, and I agree with your two horns of the lamb being Jews and Christians. And you're the first one that I ever heard say that quite a while back. And I thought I agreed then, and I think today perhaps even expanded on that. The lamb with the two horns is the one that makes people worship the image of the beast, right? Am I correct there?
Yes.
Okay, so um, if it's Jews and Christians, could it possibly be Zionism? Because we can see
Yeah.
that beast right now, both sides, this false Zionism. There is a Zionism in scripture that is real, obviously, but this false Zionism now that we see, where it encompasses, the Jews are going to rule and reign in Judaism, and the Christians basically are setting themselves as subservient of either not being here or being Noahides under this Zionist type beast. And so, am I thinking correctly there along the lines of what you're thinking regarding the two horns possibly being Zionism, this false Zionism?
Yeah, I had a whole section in this teaching about that, but then, the teaching started to get real long and I had to take out some things. Yes, Judaism and Christianity together create this scenario where now there is a beast man who sets up this image that everyone must worship. And it's the Zionism that we see that's going on right now. See, it's man's Zionism. It's not Yahweh's Zionism. Yahweh's Zion is Yeshua is the Messiah, he's the God, and he's the King. In man's Zionism, man is the Messiah, the beast, and he is the God. He's going to go into the temple and show himself to be God, right? And he's also the king. It's a man. And then you will worship his image. I hope that made sense.
It makes sense for sure. And I had something I was going to say, but I don't know if this is the right place to put out this what if, so I will skip it. But let's see. Okay, so I agree with you on all of that, and I agree with the marker being the abomination of desolation, whatever that ultimately looks like. And I totally, absolutely agree with what you told Roger, that it is something that everyone is going to see. Absolutely. And it's not just going to happen in everybody's individual hearts where we can't see it. Wasn't saying that at all. I think what we're going to see, if it is something to do with shutting up free speech and all of that, what we will see is this man of sin standing on Temple Mount, outlawing free speech regarding Yeshua Messiah, and then setting up whatever the abomination of desolation is that now, like Nebuchadnezzar, you're supposed to pray to this or whatever.
Well,
So
before you go on, let me address that because there are two Knesset members that are, I believe both of them are ultra Orthodox And they've had in the Knesset, in the background, a bill outlawing evangelizing for Yeshua. Right now in Israel, you cannot talk about Yeshua to any Jew who is under the age of 18. You can get your butt thrown in jail for doing that. And I see at the feasts these Christians, and they come over with all their zeal, and they're going to convert these Jews to Christianity, and they need to be careful who they're talking to, because it's already illegal to talk to somebody under the age of 18 about Yeshua. Now, I think it was in, I don't know, between 2019 and 2021, Gaffney and that other guy they took it out of, they got the mothballs off of this bill from the 1990s, and they presented it in the Knesset. And then there was some kind of political disaster that happened. I can't remember what it was. So they mothballed this thing again. I think it was mothballed in like 2023. My dates are probably wrong, but it just happened very recently. And that bill is to outlaw anybody talking to any Jew about Yeshua, period. So that bill is already afoot in the Knesset. It's not going to take the Antichrist beast to come and do that. I believe that thing is going to be even before he comes. Or, it may be, maybe he'll, make that legislation and say, yeah, we're going to do that. What the outlawing of is not the outlawing of praying, like what's been going on in Jerusalem with, the Jews not able to pray on Temple Mount. It's going to be the outlawing of our testimony, as you just said. And so that can come at any time, but such a thing as that will not be made into a covenant. That's not a covenant issue. That's a political and legal issue. Okay, so go, you can answer that, or you can go on. I'm done.
Yeah, no, nope, I see what you're saying. What I'm saying is even bigger than that the anti-Messiah will come and, he's going to say that he is God. He's going to say, well, God, or he's going to say he's Yeshua, or who knows what. But what he, I think, may do in that vein of free speech being part of the sacrifice of praise and prayer is outlawed for the entire world, not just testifying to Jews in the land. I'm talking testifying to anybody in the entire world.
Absolutely.
He's going to say, you're going to pray to me.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so
I agree with that. Yeah. But again, that part is not covenant. That's not the covenant that's going to be made. That's just a legality. And by the way, it says that people are going to be drawn into or taken into the synagogues and the Sanhedrins. You do know that Chabad has over 3,500 synagogues worldwide, and they are the ultra Orthodox, and those are the places where believers are going to be taken. So you're right, this is a worldwide thing that's going to happen.
Right. And so, yeah, I think that could be part of this visual abomination of desolation. He gets up there and declares, this is now law. I'm God, or this is the image or whatever. I mean, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I just think that that's part of it, is causing people not to be able to confess with their mouth and praise. And that's shutting down, Romans 10:9, where you speak with your mouth and believe in your heart. And then following that, he's going to try and keep people from believing in their hearts because we won't be able to testify with our mouth. and
Well,
then he's
and
gonna
Dawn,
replace
that's
Yeshua.
exactly what Iran is doing with Christians now. They cannot testify about Yeshua publicly.
Right. Right. Yeah, yeah. So I think that that's going to be the worldwide thing when we see this abomination of desolation, whatever that looks like. So that's kind of what I was trying to get to earlier. But so like I said, I really didn't believe that we disagreed. I think we were just coming at it from different angles. And which is why I appreciate these conversations so much. The one thing that I think is that I did not, and we'll see who's right, but I think the witnesses witnessing the last 3.5 years. And so that's part of what we will see, because they're going to come and go on Temple Mount with their speech that he just outlawed and use their speech to testify that he's a liar to the whole earth, which is why he hates them so much and tries to kill them, and then eventually does end up killing them. But I think that when he's in power, they are also testifying the truth against this declaration that he makes that you can't do it. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, that's the thing, is that in the timeline that Yeshua gave us, the gospel being preached happens before the abomination of desolation, the attack on Israel that shuts down the sacrifices. It's in the verse just prior, and he says, basically in this, my two witnesses. Let me go to Matthew 24:14, so you can get a sense of, because this is happening just it it says in Matthew 24:14, this good news of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world for a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. And so I understand why you say that the two witnesses will witness during the second half, because it says, and then the end will come. But the end, the signal for the end to come, is the abomination of desolation. And so that's why I believe it's in the first half, that they will, because they will be defying the Jewish law from the Knesset that says you can't talk to Jews about Yeshua, and they're going to defy that. And then that will continue with people who are subjected to the Iranian Shiite 12th Imam. So during that whole 7 years, you're going to be in danger if you're talking about Yeshua. Go ahead, Dawn.
Yeah, and so it just depends on what he meant there by then the end will come. And I'm taking it to mean, like you said, the end of the rule of the anti-Messiah, the end of this age, and the beginning of his kingdom is what and that's at the end is when the bowl judgments are poured out. And so I'm thinking that their testimony is up until that point, and then the end comes. So yeah, I can see your point, and I can see where we'll just have to watch and see. And I'm sure that when they start testifying, we'll know it. So anyhow, I just thought I'd throw that out there. But again, thank you very much for this whole discussion and for being willing to put all of this out there for us to think about. And I think it's so important at this time. And so I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. John.
Kimberly, I'm so conscious of the time, and I don't particularly want to overstep, privileges of your time availability. So I'm going to be very, very quick. I did
My
say,
time is yours.
really? Well, yes, I have so many questions, and I think some will have to sort of stay for maybe possibly next week. But my first premise is that our studentship in the Word is, as I said earlier, about keeping eyes wide open in terms of prophecy, relating obviously to the end of days. Now, you did give us one definitive indicator, which was Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. We know that for sure, and things will then start running beyond that point. But I just wanted to make some comments without going into too deep details of questions, etc., on Daniel 11. So just to say that I think personally, the starting point in terms of timelines, if you like, is taking a leaf from the story of Joseph. First, that there will be famine. Then it progresses to financial collapse, then World War, and then the Great Reset. The reason why I said that very briefly is that in the parallel of Joseph, the people said to him, "Our money is gone and our livestock belongs to you, Joseph," who represents Pharaoh. "There is nothing left for our Lord except our bodies and our land. Buy us and our land in exchange for food." So I'm thinking maybe that could be a starting point where we take a leaf from the story of Joseph. Then, of course, we go into subjugation of humanity, of the human race. When we're forced to receive the mark on our right hand or forehead. But there is also a state to come, a new state, shall we say, where there is transitioning from being made in the image of the beast instead of what we are supposed to be, the image of Elohim, whereby they're saying, all sicknesses, all diseases will be cured, and the received mark, as we know, as you said, is irreversible. So just going on a little bit more, then we have the remnant of believers, which is the group, and because of the spiritual application and devotion, was provided for and protected during the famine and the coming devastation. In terms of the parallel with Joseph, we had, of course, the land of the priest. They received, they had enough food, for example. And then I think we do have this lack of wisdom, that many will swallow the lies of the adversary and will either be captured and persecuted. Well, we know that there are persecutions going on now wholesale in many other countries in the world. But as you quite rightly said earlier, Yeshua himself gave us indicators too. He gave us markers in Matthew chapter 24, that many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And then, of course, there's going to be lots of false prophets that will appear and deceive many people. The increase of wickedness and the love of most will grow cold. And it goes on because Yeshua gave us so many pointers in terms of the cosmic blackouts and things like that. Now, you have already mentioned that the midpoint, which is during the fall feast, that the man of perdition is revealed and the great tribulation starts. And that's where, as you confirmed with me earlier on, the ingathering takes place. So if I may, just if you do have the time, Kimberly, Daniel chapter 11. In there, we take cognizance of the fact that he said, but or at least the Lord said to him, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end." and many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. So yes, in terms of timeline, I don't think we can really get that because of the sealing of the book until the time of the end. Now, in Daniel chapter 11, I read that, and in verse 2, it says, "Now I will show you the truth." And then in verse 6, it goes on to say, "At the end of years, they shall join themselves together, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north." Now, I don't want to go into the king of north and south because you've already explained that in times past, and particularly last week as well, who is the king of the north and who is the king of the south, to make an agreement. But she, this is where I started to get a little bit confused, shall not retain the strength of her arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and those who brought her as well, and he who became the father of her, and he who strengthened her in those times. There's a lot of he and she and her and they there. So confusing. I don't know. I really don't know, think, Kimberly, that this might be the right time to press you for those things. But also in verse 23 and 25 and 27, it goes on again, the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully. The king of the south shall war in battle with an exceeding great and mighty army, but he shall not stand. For they, and I don't know who the they is, they there, shall devise devices against him. And it goes on to verse 27. As for both these kings, their hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper. For yet the end shall be at the appointed time. Those are the kind of things I really needed some clarification, Kimberly. If this is not the time today, maybe if you wish, at some other time, we can look at the whole of that chapter 11, which has a lot more questions.
Well, I can answer kind of briefly your question about Daniel 11:6 has to do with it was fulfilled um, in roughly around 250 BC as an alliance between the Seleucid king of Greece, and that was Antiochus II, and he was in the north. And Ptolemy II was in Egypt, the south, and they made a peace treaty with Ptolemy's daughter Bernice, and she did not, keep the power of her arm because Antiochus then died, and so then she was, not able to continue in that power. And then in Daniel 11:23, it's about another alliance, and this one had to do with also with Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV, who he's the one that came to seize Jerusalem. These they're all of from Daniel 39 all the way back to number 1 verse. All of those incidences have historical markers in the that way back there, that you can research them and learn about them.
Okay.
So that's just kind of a brief history, but Daniel 11:40-45 does not have an historical marker.
Okay. Right. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I'm very conscious of the time, Kimberly. I know you've said you're quite happy to carry on, but I think we must respect also, your timing and your generosity to help us along in understanding. So let me say thank you very much again for this teaching. I was really excited when you put it on email to say that you were going to do this today. Yes.
Okay, I'm glad you were excited. Julianne. Julianne.
Oh,
She's
Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah.
Apologies to everyone. I'll be very fast because I don't know when I finally got on. But in regards to what I was hearing, in my heart, I do believe we are in those times and that the preparation and the steps that they, the Zionists, are taking is worldwide and is already spreading. And I encourage everybody to look back at the steps that they are taking to have prepared the masses to accept this false narrative that is going to be presented, I feel, very soon, if not right now, in the COVID. I believe that was worldwide. We all know that. I was yelled at for not wearing a mask from people across the street. I truly believe it was a psyop to see how far they could push the narrative of getting everybody on that agenda, and they succeeded. So I believe that was a check mark off their list in preparation to what is to come. I've been hearing a lot about these preachers and pastors that are going to Israel to be taught and re-educated in Zionist speak, and they're returning back to wherever they're from around the world to teach it to their congregations. I personally don't have a location to go to, but I do know a few of you have, and I do speak to people, and the talk now is about ICE and how we have to support them and go against, ICE. And I've seen it with my own eyes, people heckling them. So I believe, just like Black Lives Matter, I believe that the destruction that happened in parts of the United States, and I saw revolts in other nations and walks and speech, and I believe it's all an agenda to see how fast they can make us believe a certain subject to deviate from what's really happening. It's very interesting, and I'm reading Ezekiel, where the east part of the temple, where Ezekiel was allowed to see the abomination occurring actually in the temple, and at the east gate, and those 25 elders worshiping the sun. For some reason, I feel that's going to happen again. If they start doing that, it's going to happen in the east side of the temple. And the one thing, John, that you made me think of is the mark, is that in Ezekiel, I think 12, the angel of the Lord, or 13, it talks about the remnant will be marked also when the destruction of those that are evil come. And it's those that cry and weep for the abominations that are happening around the world. And I do feel too, Kimberly, that not speaking about Jesus is huge, huge, especially in California that I'm here right now. It's our higher power, our God. And the stuff I heard about people just so angry with Yeshua, the name of Yeshua, they won't even speak it. But thank you for everyone. I can't wait to listen, and I apologize again, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Julianne. Okay, does anybody have a prayer request before we head out? Okay. Well, Father, We thank you and praise you for this time together and this lively discussion and so many things for us all to consider and prayerfully to consider. Father, I do continue to pray for Glenn on the ingathering group, that you would continue to heal him and strengthen him and strengthen Amanda, his wife, in all that needs to be done. Father, I just thank you for how you protect and you provide for all of us, and how your glory shows who you are. Your creation shows your glory, and it's your glory and your mercy, Father, that prevails and that will prevail over the wicked one. And we thank you for letting us live in this time when the prophets wanted to be here to see this day, but we get to see it. So preserve our lives so that we can see this all come to pass, and we can see Yeshua come to the earth to restore his kingdom and to conquer evil and to conquer sin and to conquer all the things that will set up his kingdom by the end of the 7th millennium, so that we can all be at eternal peace. And so, Father, I thank you and praise you, and I pray that we'll all be back next week and well provided for and well protected by you. In Yeshua's name, amen. All right, everybody.
Amen.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. And Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.